Welcome back to an all-new episode of Canzano and Wilner, the podcast. We've got and it's also a video cast. We've got a special guest today. University of Washington head football coach Jed Fisch has completed his first season in Seattle. He is headed toward his second season. Make sure you subscribe to this video cast. Hit that subscribe button. And if you're watching on YouTube, and you can read me at johncanzano.com. You can read Wilner at wilnerhotline.com. Wilner, Jed Fisch. Why Jed Fisch? Why is he an important guest?
I think Jed Fisch is a perfect guest for this moment in time with college athletics, right? Because the line between college football and the NFL is vanished almost completely now that we're entering the revenue sharing era. You know, you almost you got a salary cap. You got to figure out how much money you're putting to various positions. And he's been in the NFL. He worked for Bill Belichick. So I think it will be fascinating to hear his view on how you manage your roster, put together your roster, deal with the portal, deal with tampering, the differences, right? The differences between the NFL and college football. Are there any anymore? I'm fascinated to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, I want to hear what he thinks of Bill Belichick being in the game and his young quarterback, Damon Williams Jr.
Yep.
Like, you know, what was that moment where he said, I just got to play the guy. It's time to turn to him. So I guess without further ado, let's bring on Jed Fisch, Washington coach. Coach, how you doing, man? How are things? What's new?
I'm doing great. Just been out on the road recruiting, taking a little break to talk to you guys, and then get back at it at a school here in about 30 minutes or 45 minutes. And all's good.
Jed, you got a rooting interest in the Super Bowl here, a personal rooting interest, huh?
I do. I'm excited for a couple guys on that staff, man, are huge, very close friends of mine, obviously the general manager and the defensive coordinator. So, you know, Howie was my college roommate and Vic was my first ever boss. So I spent 3 years being the defensive quality control coach for Vic at the Houston Texans. So those two guys are huge parts of my career, huge parts of my life, and really excited for them.
What would Howie say was the best part and worst part about being a roommate with you in college?
Oh, man, that's a great question. You probably have to ask him that, but I would probably say the best part was our mutual love for football.
Yeah.
So there was never an issue about who had the remote control. There was not like a lot of conflicting views that we wanted to see. The worst part might have been the fact that I don't think I provided any real help around the apartment. I'm not sure I was great at cooking or great at cleaning up. I'd say he'd probably say those were probably the worst part about it.
I think that's probably true of everybody at that age. You're figuring things out. Like you're watching guys that you coached with, you know, in the NFL now, you know, coming into college, and Belichick comes to mind. I think first time we talked, you had talked about that sabbatical that you took working for Bill Belichick. What do you think about Belichick coming to college football?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't say working for him was a sabbatical. That would have been the opposite of what it actually was. It's as hard as it gets and great as it gets. I love it. I love it for him and for his family and for what he wanted to do. I mean, it was clearly he wanted to continue coaching, and he loves the coaching. He loves teaching. He loves mentoring staffs and players. So the opportunity for him to do that was at North Carolina. So he took it. And I think that's like so great. And Steve went with him. And I think it's awesome for Steve to have the opportunity to coach with his dad one final go around. I would imagine, this would probably be Coach Belichick's last job that he takes. So it's a chance for Steve and Coach to coach together for a bunch of years, I hope. And that's awesome for them. And I'm also very grateful for our time. Our relationship is very strong. Continue to talk often about the dynamics of college football, and just an awesome opportunity for him. And we had a great year together with Steve this past year, and obviously with Bill's impact in our program as well.
Jed, when something like that happens with Bill, and you've got his son is on your staff, can you kind of walk us through how the dynamics work of Steve continuing to coach for you guys when his dad is taking a job in college at potentially a competitor for recruits?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Steve wanted to continue to coach at Washington. He was deciding what he was going to do. We had a bowl game. I never really thought too much that, I gave him the option, obviously, I said, hey, if you want to go with your dad now, you can certainly do that. But he didn't want to do that. He wanted to keep coaching. He wanted to finish where he started. We didn't spend a ton of time talking about it after the initial one or two conversations, maybe. He had to figure out, he just moved his family across the country. He's got 4 kids. They just settled into a house. So there's a lot of decisions that have to go on. And, are you going to take the job? Are you going to move back with your dad? Bill was just figuring out exactly what he wanted to do. So I really thought that it was, our best interest to let Steve continue to coach our team for the bowl game. It was the least disruptive. I think things would be extremely disruptive if you have a guy, leave your staff 3 weeks before you play in a game, and then he's put in a tough position, because then it's like, should I try to recruit guys? Should I not? Should I try to, are we going to get guys to come visit us or not? It was a much better situation for all of us to go to sleep every night knowing Steve's a Husky until he's not. And, I feel great about the way he handled it. I thought he handled it like the ultimate pro.
Give us an idea. Most of us haven't been in that position when you are either leaving or someone's coming to you to say, hey, I'm taking another job. And you've been in it a number of times where you've probably knocked on the head coach's door or called him and said, hey, I've got another opportunity. How do those conversations go? And,
is that a subtle jab that I've been in a few times?
Nah,
looking at my Wikipedia page or something like that there, John. Yeah. I think there's so many things that go into each move and each opportunity, and the relationship that the assistant coach and the head coach have really determine how deep of a conversation you get into. There were plenty of jobs that I didn't take because after sitting down and talking with the head coach, it didn't seem like the right move. And then there were certain ones that I did take for that same reason. Sitting down and talking to him was the right move. There were other jobs that I was forced to take because we were let go. When I was with Coach Shanahan at Denver, when I was with Coach Billick at Baltimore, they had 9-year and 15-year runs, but, I happened to be there on the back end of it. With Coach Billick, I was there 4 years. With Coach Shanahan, I was there 1. So, we had to make decisions, right? So in 07, 08, those weren't really options. I think so. Each time it's different. You go in there, you talk to the coach, you say, hey, here's a situation. I did it with Coach Belichick when Arizona called. I said, Coach, because we were in week 14, just got done getting ready to go play the Miami Dolphins week 15. And I walked in there and I said, Coach, the president of the University of Arizona called, and he wanted to talk with me and see my interest in being their head coach. What do you think about that? And you have a long and lengthy conversation at times, and then they share with you the pros and the cons, and you share with them the pros and the cons, and then they make a decision whether or not that's something they'll let you out of their contract for.
Is managing an NFL roster really any different going forward with college, with the revenue sharing, NIL? I mean, is it basically the same structure?
No, I don't think so. I think a lot of people are immediately comparing the two because now people are getting paid. Yep. The difference is, there's a draft rather than recruiting. That still hasn't changed. There's a very strict contractual obligation that players have to their teams in the NFL. There is no real contractual obligation that college players have to their team. There's very strict obligations contractually between assistant coaches to their NFL teams. The obligations for assistant coaches in college are buyouts. There are no buyouts in the NFL. You're just not allowed to leave from one team to another without ownership permission. So I think it's a very different leagues. The leagues are still very different. contracts matter a lot more in pro football than they do in college. The tampering, I mean, to lose a draft pick, to get fined hundreds of thousands of dollars, that's what happens in the NFL if there's any tampering whatsoever. And then in addition, in our situations in college, we have 2 opportunities to be an unrestricted free agent every single year. In pro football, you might have 1 opportunity every 4 years to be an unrestricted free agent unless your contract gives you maybe a 2-year opportunity. So it is so different in that regard that we really need to start building in some similar restraints, or we're going to just start seeing 4 years, 4 teams, 4 players, and the degrees are going to start being minimized, and the education aspect will kind of get turned upside down.
The tampering thing, it comes up a lot when I talk to coaches, and I'm curious from your standpoint, like, how prevalent is it, and what could be done to stop it? If you're the czar of football and we say stop tampering, what kind of penalties could we install?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very easy to stop, but for some reason, it seems like maybe no one's agreeing with me, but make contracts mean something. That would be the way to stop it. Penalize, make you, lose 5 scholarships for tampering, lose, what is the definition of tampering? What does it look? Make contracts more than every 6 months. The only way to stop tampering is if we have better regulation on whether or not movement is going to be, real or not real. Like, if people call our players after every single game they play. I mean, I have players, and what I think certain teams don't realize is the relationship you have with your own player is far stronger than the relationship that somebody thinks that they have by calling one of our players. Mm-hmm. So the information comes back to us all the time. And so we're aware of every tampering event that occurs. The question becomes is, what is tampering? Is it allowed or is it not allowed? And until we figure out it's not allowed, then it's going to continue. Or unless we allow third parties to continue to reach out and say that they have no real obligation to the university, they'll continue to do that. That doesn't happen in pro football. You don't have Jared Goff the day after the game did not get a phone call from the Minnesota Vikings and say, hey, are you available for if we can add, $1 million onto your deal, or $3 million or $10 million if you talk NFL terms? Are you available? And if you are, just go in the portal in 4 days. That doesn't happen. So, that's why the leagues are so different. So roster management is so unique in that regard.
How will you guys decide, assuming revenue sharing is the law of the land starting in the summer, how will you all decide your quarterback spot, your left tackle, your edge rusher? I assume you guys have thought through most of that. Can you share some of your strategic approach to that?
Yeah, for sure. Now that, I would say, does have a lot of NFL similarities. In that instance, you do look at, or I should say everybody's different, but our program looks at, all right, pro football, they've got a $250 million, cap. How much do they spend on their quarterback position by percentage? How much do they spend on their, left tackle position by percentage? Did they take this person early? Did they develop them? Is he under a rookie contract, meaning a freshman? Is he, did you bring him in as a free agent, meaning the portal? And then what does that look like in comparison? So I think in that regard, you do have the ability to say, all right, we're going to decide what we want to spend at each position group, and then we're going to make a decision on what type of team we're going to be. You're going to see some programs in, I coached for the Baltimore Ravens from 04 to 07, and a tremendous amount of our cap space was on defense. Ray Lewis, Terrell Suggs, Ed Reed, Chris McAllister, Haloti Ngata. That was all on one defense. And so we were very skewed cap-wise. The Rams right now are playing with a very young defense and a very veteran offense. They're skewed the other way cap-wise. So we got to make those decisions, and that's what I hope that my experience in the NFL and having 15 years and also having 7 different teams and organizations and head coaches and general managers to rely upon will help us maybe navigate these waters a little differently.
Do you think we'll see some teams that can play money ball? I mean, use the baseball term. I mean, or is that a depth thing? If you are loading up with, hey, I've got 3 quarterbacks in the room, they're all getting paid. What are some different approaches you think we'll see with maybe teams that get to the playoff or play in the top 25?
I mean, I think we played money ball, and at Arizona, we certainly played money ball. But if you look at our team from 2 years ago at Arizona, when we won 10 games and we're on a 7-game win streak, I mean, we were playing money ball. When you look at the team that we had this year, we were playing money ball. You have to make a decision on what. First of all, it's until we get to revenue share, it's dictated by collectives. So every year you have a different approach and mentality, but per collective. I think you can't go to your, we'll call it ownership group, and ask for an enormous amount of dollars if you don't overpay. I don't believe in overpaying. So you've got to say, hey, this might not be the year, but next year might be the year. Or we've got to figure out, we have only 1 returning starter. So we don't have, when we got to Washington, we had 1 returning starter. So it was different. We didn't, how do you go and just say, we're going to make the same push that Ohio State and Oregon felt like they needed to make this year, or some of the other programs that needed to make a huge push. Our situation more was like, we were just trying to get players. We're just trying to find it. We had 7 offensive linemen at spring football, and 2 of them were coming off of ACL surgeries. So we were in a very unique position versus maybe other programs were. So there's going to be some money ball played. I hope what it is more of understanding, what's the responsibility to the university? What's the responsibility of your fan base? What's the responsibility of your team to make sure you can put together the best possible football team for the right amount of money?
So do you see Washington football taking the same approach that Ohio State and Oregon are going to take in the new era, maxing out on your revenue sharing, NIL, real quote unquote NIL over the cap? Can you see the institution of the University of Washington and the Husky fans being all in the way they're all in Eugene and Columbus and Ann Arbor?
Yeah, I do. And I'm very much been aware that that's our philosophy. We're maximizing revenue share as of this year. So we are going to go the absolute max we can give out to our football program is what we're going to give out to our football program. We're, in the middle of working very hard with Amazon and Microsoft and Alaska Airlines and T-Mobile and Starbucks and all of these incredible multi-billion-dollar, and even trillion-dollar companies, Costco, that are all here in Seattle. I think we have an incredible opportunity here. We need to continue to approach it in that regard. We obviously are half share, as you know, for the next 4 years. We need to fill that gap as we're building our personnel department up, as we're building our operations department up, as we're building our coaching staff up. We're going to continue to do that. There's been a great commitment by Pat Chun to want to go win a national championship. He came from Ohio State. He was a part of the staff that hired Urban Meyer. He was worked with Jim Tressel when they won the national championship. Pat understands what it's going to take to win a national championship. And we don't do it. I saw Brian Schottenheimer's quote was, you don't do this not to try to win a championship. And, the very, very difficult decision I made leaving Arizona to go to Washington, I did that because of, I really, really, really genuinely believe Washington is one of the 15 teams that can win a national championship. Yep. And we are going to work excessively hard to do that.
The job of a head football coach, what doesn't the public understand?
That's what I'm trying to understand. Yeah. I'm trying to figure. I feel like Bill Parcells once said you have a to-do list when you leave, And then when you wake up in the morning, you look at your to-do list, and none of those things are what you have to do right now.
Right.
There's a whole new to-do list that arrived, let's call it today. So the job of the head football coach right now is, I think January is the most challenging time, December and January, because you're trying to keep a staff, keep a team, recruit a team, get a team connected, make sure that you're able to fill whatever departures you have, and make sure that that doesn't affect multiple other things within your program. You have to raise money for the year. You have to find ways to make sure that you're constantly out in the public, at basketball games, at events, making sure people see you and see how you want to impact the community. And then also try to reinvigorate yourself. So when you get back to it, when it's time to start doing football again, you haven't worn yourself out doing everything but football. So it's kind of a job that has a lot of different hats. I mean, I'm have a donor event in between a high school event, in between a media obligation, in between another high school, in between another donor event. And that's what I think we're doing right now. And then hopefully in February, we'll be able to really spend time with our football team and our scheme.
Jed, any lessons from the first year in the Big Ten, whether it is a personnel lesson or, logistics dealing with the travel?
Yeah. The first year in the Big Ten was certainly a great challenge for a lot of reasons. Number one, the teams that we did a good job against the teams that we played on a consistent basis, meaning we beat USC, we beat UCLA. Oregon right now, or this past year, was at an elite level. We weren't able to play the way we wanted to play against them. We beat Michigan, who, we felt like that was probably our best game of the year, the way we played. But then we also struggled against some of the Big Ten teams that are built over time. Penn State has been built over time. Iowa has been built over time. Indiana was the oldest team in college football. They were a team that was actually built at James Madison and brought over to Indiana, and I give them a ton of credit for how they handled that. We had a 31-17 game, didn't play our best. Even Rutgers has been built over time. Coach Shiano's been there now 4 or 5 years, building that back up to where he wants it. We had a game that we didn't play our best ball. So we need to improve. We need to play big. You got to be big in the Big Ten. You got to be able to handle the O-line and the D-line of both teams, meaning you got to be able to stop the run and run the ball, neither of which we did very well. We certainly, were built more Pac-12 in terms of our physical nature.
Yep.
We recruited more Big Ten. In terms of what we wanted to sign in December, we signed 4 offensive linemen that arrived already on campus that are over 325 pounds, that are over 6'5". We went to the transfer portal and looked for size and age at the defensive line. We hopefully will get some of our defensive line back, but we're playing with 260-pound DNs now rather than 230-pound DNs that you play in the Pac-12, and 315 to 320-pound interior guys versus 290, 295. So we're really trying to build that, and then keeping everybody back, having Jonah Coleman come back, playing with a freshman the last few weeks to really get him going at quarterback, bringing in a little more speed at receiver on one side, and then keeping the size with Denzel Boston. Our tight ends are all in the 6'5" range now, 250 versus the 6'3" range, 220. And then our linebackers, obviously bringing Buddha in from Wazoo as a great tackler. Jacob Manu is a great tackler.
Yep.
I thought that our Big Ten linebackers, Carson Bruner and Zoe, were Big Ten linebackers. They looked the part. They were the part. We got to make sure we keep that. And then our secondary, having Takario Davis and Prysock. Now you've got 2 6'4" corners on the edge. So I think we're built more for it. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I think we have another rotation of continuing to build it. And then we got to learn about, the travel. We had 2 9 a.m. kickoffs, at Indiana and at Iowa. That's very different than flying from Indiana to California.
Yeah.
And playing at 3:30. right? Flying from Washington to Indiana and playing at 9 a.m., which is noon their time, which is a 5 a.m. Breakfast.
Yeah.
That's different for these kids. They're still kids. They still went to school Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday morning. So we got to work through that, but we only have 3 of those. We got Wisconsin, Michigan, and Maryland on the road. And then all of our other games are in the West Coast this year. So I'm excited about that.
You mentioned your freshman quarterback. I got to see him in that Oregon game. Demond Williams Jr., fantastic player, like super excited to see what he can be in the next couple of years. But what did you see that made you say, hey, I got to get him on the field. It's time to play him.
Throughout the year, I played him about 8 to 10 plays a game. And I think, initially there was doubters on that philosophy, but we were building our foundation of our program. We weren't trying to win the national championship last year. We tried to win every game, but you have to evaluate what your team is. So I felt it was really important to get Demond out there and get Demond in a situation where he could play and we could continue to look at how he was growing and how good he was getting and how much better he could be as we were laying the groundwork for what was going to be a championship run, I think, in the future. Getting him in against UCLA, well, the second half against Penn State, we really struggled the first half. So I thought it was an opportunity to kind of keep Will's confidence. So I didn't want him to just go back out there in the second half. Against UCLA, it was a 14-13 game, and we just threw our second interception in the red area. And I just felt as if it was time. And Demond went in, and we scored 17 straight points. Won the game, I think 31-19, but it was 31-13 with a minute left in the game. And I felt, at that point, it was time. He's now earned it. It was week 10. We scored 17 straight when he went in the game. I knew Oregon was this year. I thought that his ability to use his feet was going to be an advantage. I didn't want to sit back there. I mean, we took a ton of sacks anyhow, but it was a chance for him to make some plays with his feet. He was 17 for 20 passing, which was really impressive. And then came out to the bowl game. And after his first pass was tipped and his second pass was picked off, he went 28 for 32 and threw 4 touchdowns and ran for a 5th. And I thought that it proved to me, it was very similar to the Noah Fafita. When we put Noah against Washington, we lost. Then we played against USC.
Yep.
43-41, triple overtime. Got stopped on a 2-point play. Got stopped on a 2-point play in his second start. Now against Louisville, 35-34. And I'm hoping that Demond takes that same jump.
So I assume you kind of you have exit interviews or something similar with all your players before the offseason. What was your advice or to-do list for Demond, away from the weight room, away from the training facility for the next 6 months?
Be an elite studier of the game. Watch as much football as you can on TV and listen to the commentators. Yeah. Listen to Tony Romo, listen to Tom Brady do the games. You don't have to listen to the other guys.
Yeah.
But listen to those 2 guys talk. Listen to what they point out. I make a big point of emphasis that if you listen to what Romo says and if you listen to what Tom says, you're going to learn so much more than you ever thought you could watching a football game. So I have them go back and watch on YouTube the games that those guys commentated. We talk a lot about, what type. He's a 4.0 student, so academics is not an issue for him. He continues to kill it in the classroom. But he needs to just know that everything he's going to do, nutrition-wise, everything he's going to do now in the community, all eyes are on him. So every decision now he makes away from the building is a decision that affects University of Washington football in a positive way. So continue to do that. And then, we'll get him out to Manning camp. We'll get him out to, do some private training stuff. And then obviously he's going to lead this football team. Coach,
I really appreciate you giving us your time and expertise. And I think there's a lot of people interested in what you're doing and excited to see what you can do on the field this year. And certainly your experience in the NFL is fascinating, as we look at what's happening to college athletics. But thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me on.
Really appreciate it, Jed. Good luck to off season.
Thanks. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you
care.
so much.
I thought it was fascinating what he said, sort of building the roster.
Yeah.
Really interesting stuff to hear. A guy with NFL experience talk about, the roster building process and his experience in the NFL and how that helps. What about you?
I got a little bit of a lengthy answer to that question. So, and we were taught, Jay was joking before we started recording, right? He was joking about how I've been a little bit skeptical on the Huskies.
Yeah.
And that actually segued to one of the questions I asked about the commitment, right? And this is, to me, this is the central issue for Washington and for everybody really in this next era. You got to are you going to spend the max on your football roster in revenue sharing? And are you going to go over, because there's going to be NIL that takes schools over the cap? And Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State and Oregon and USC are going to do everything they can. Does Washington have the institutional commitment and the commitment from its constituents to do basically whatever it takes to compete with Ohio State and Oregon, right? And to me, that's the central question for the Huskies. It was this, not so much this past year, but certainly this coming season with revenue sharing and the rest of the decade. Is Washington all in across the board? And he certainly seems to think so. Every indication he gave us was that he believes, even though they've got they're changing out presidents, right? He seems to think they are all in Seattle. And that, to me, is the essential question for Washington in the Big Ten.
Well, I mean, if you look back at the last two college football seasons, you have Washington playing Michigan for the national championship. And then the subsequent season, Oregon goes pedal to the metal and is the number one team in the country in the number one seed in the 12-team playoff. I feel like these two schools are good for each other in that way. And that I know Oregon didn't like looking over and seeing Washington with Michael Penix having all that success and Kalen DeBoer. And, it was probably celebrated a little bit by Duck fans when DeBoer leaves Washington because Dan Lanning had trouble with, beating Washington. And then I think, to answer your question, is Washington all in? They better be. Just like Adidas better be looking over at Nike, right? And saying, hey, are we doing what they're doing? And you're in an arms race. Your rival school that joined the Big Ten with you is the number one team in the country. If you don't spend at the max, if you don't have an NIL collective that's going to come in over the top, you are very quickly going to fall behind in this world.
I agree with you that they better be, but what does the faculty think? What are the regents, the new president? I mean, it has to be to compete with Oregon and Ohio State. You got to have alignment across the board.
Yes.
And everybody moving in the same direction in a much more confusing environment with revenue sharing and an environment that's antithetical to the mission of higher education in a lot of ways. So, Washington to me has always had that. Where's the lean? Well, to me, Washington's lean a little academically. I kind of think Washington versus Oregon is a little like UCLA versus USC, a little bit like Michigan versus Penn State, and you kind of are trying to find the direction, the alignment of the academic versus athletic balance. And in this next era, if you don't have it, if you're not all in, it's going to be really hard, especially in the Big Ten.
Yeah, you talk alignment. You got a new football coach, you got a relatively new athletic director, got a new president. There's some wild card feel to that. And if you don't have that congruency of vision, top to bottom, I don't care if you're a restaurant or an NFL team or a college team. If you don't have that alignment and that congruency of vision, you are fighting yourself. You are swimming upstream. So I think it's a good point. I like what Fisch had to say. I think I've always enjoyed talking with him. I've had him on my radio show a few times. He's real. And, when he started talking about the sizes of his players and how they've upgraded, I literally was thinking like, these coaches are trading commodities. I mean, they're all looking for defensive tackles who are older and bigger, and just an interesting conversation. I'd love to hear what people think. post in the comment section. Tell us who you want to see on Canzano and Wilner as the next guest, and give us your big takeaway from that interview with Jed Fisch. Make sure you subscribe as well. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube, and we will catch you next week with an all-new episode.
Thanks, everybody.